Okay, thank you, Hafiza. Hello, Prof. Wanti.
Oh, there's a feedback, I think, a little bit.
Okay. My voice?
Yes. There's still a feedback. Maybe the microphone on one of the all the computer in the room have to
Okay.
be muted, I think.
Okay.
I think there are
There's
still some
still
participants who
there's
haven't muted. Yeah.
voice. Um, yan, yan, yan. Okay.
Ada yang belum mute Naki Nadik, Naki ya. So maybe I think who has the host because you can if you are the host you can actually mute the participants. Mungkin yang jadi host itu di mute aja Bu, yang pesertanya. Karena nanti ada feedback.
Okay, now what about this? Um,
I think that's okay, yeah.
okay,
Is it?
that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I can hear your voice. Okay, Prof. Wanti, welcome to our class, Realistic Mathematics Education. It is very pleasure to have you here. Let me introduce myself first. My name is Yeka, Bu Yeka, and together with Prof. Zul, Bu Eli, and we are teaching team in this class, Realistic Mathematics Education. It's very pleasure to meet you. I hope you are doing well. So we are excited to have you the opportunity to connect with you and looking forward to our class today. In this room we and in a Zoom meeting we have our students, bachelor students, master student, and also PhD students who join this meeting. So our student now we have Bu Wanti, Professor Wanti Wijaya. She is a professor in Deakin University. She is an expert in the field of mathematics education. Today, she will share and teach in the course of realistic mathematics education as a part of a young professor at Universitas Sriwijaya. So, without any further ado, I give the floor to Prof. Wanti Wijaya. The
Thank
time is
you.
yours. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Puyeka, and thank you everyone for having me today. So, I'm so sorry I couldn't be there in person. I went to Unsri earlier this year. I think that as part of um the Mathematics Day, I think the International Mathematics Day, yeah, with Pak Zul and Pak Hartono. Is it possible for me to share a screen? Because I think I need permission. Okay. Is that all right? Okay, I think I can share a screen now. Let me see. Okay, let me make it bigger. Maybe while waiting, if you can help to mute the new participants, uh, maybe I'll just find. Okay. All right. So, do you want me to speak in English or Indonesian? Sorry. Lebih
You
baik pakai bahasa Indonesia atau bahasa Inggris?
you can speak both. Sometimes you can speak in English or Bahasa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Want to make sure the students can follow. Okay, but you can stop me. Bisa tanya kapan saja ya. If you don't have any, if you don't understand, if you want to ask question, just raise your hand using the chat button because I cannot really see clearly everyone. Saya nggak bisa lihat kelasnya secara jelas. Okay, so the topic for today's lecture, I chose to focus on the importance of mathematical reasoning and creative thinking in preparing students for the education 4.0. That's the term that UNESCO used. So one of the key recommendations from UNESCO is education 4.0, and then to actually prepare for quality education by 2030. Jadi pentingnya menyiapkan siswa dan guru ya untuk bisa menyiapkan generasi masa depan itu lewat pendidikan itu yang dapat memenuhi kebutuhan gitu ya, kebutuhan dan tantangan-tantangan ke depan, masa masa yang depan. Tantangan masa depan itu kan selalu berubah ya. Kita sudah tahu sekarang yang sedang banyak dipakai dibicarakan adalah misalnya pakai artificial intelligence and ChatGPT, everyone's using that, and there's a lot of concern about what would that impact on the academic integrity and also um, the quality of learning. Ya kan, di sekolah di Indonesia juga sedang banyak diskusi ya tentang ChatGPT. Kekhawatiran dari banyak pendidik adalah sekarang kan mudah sekali tuh kalau kita pakai chat GPT lalu di type I need a lesson plan on this topic, they will generate the lesson plan very quickly. Uh, but the question is whether or not the lesson plan that that is generated is accurate and also of good quality, and also is it suitable for the context of Indonesia, local context. So there is a lot of concerns and issues as well. So I think what is critical in education for us is to actually
For us.
prepare students and teachers to be critical, to be able to select appropriately and be able to make a decisions which resources are suitable and appropriate and can support learning. So itu ya yang penting. Sekarang kan sedang banyak pembicaraan tentang penggunaan ChatGPT atau OpenAI untuk bisa membantu orang dapat membuat resources yang sangat cepat gitu ya. Masukkan saja di ChatGPT atau mau image generations, kita dapat hasil gitu ya yang cepat sekali, instantly. Tapi pertanyaan yang besar buat kita adalah apakah kemudian mahasiswa dan siswa menjadi malas tidak mau berpikir karena tidak perlu lagi mengandalkan ChatGPT, they can generate the resources. What does that impact on the academic exercise and academic integrity? Jadi banyak pertanyaan-pertanyaan dan itu tantangan perubahan yang sangat cepat kan. Nah, kita sebagai pendidik, that's our responsibility to make sure that our learning process in maths education also prepare our students to be critical thinker. They can reason, they can solve problems, they can think for themselves, they can communicate to others ya. Karena kalau sudah selesai kuliah itu waktu mencari kerja, if we are applying for jobs, I don't know but in Indonesian case, but they are not going to ask you what is your mark for calculus, for example. That's not the selection criteria, right? Kalau mau cari kerja kan seleksi kriteria kerjanya bukan nilainya dapat berapa kalkulus misalnya atau integral atau real analysis, what is your grade? That they won't worry too much about that. They might be more worried about whether or not as a teacher or as a staff member, if you're working at the university, can you work with other people? Can you communicate your thinking? Can you solve problems together? So those are the critical skills that we need in everyday life. So, and mathematics should be part of that development of those skills. Yeah. So, semua cukup familiar with the 21st century skills or competencies. Tadi yang saya sebutkan, learning innovation. So we need to be adaptive uh, in our approach to learning. Have to think outside the box sometimes if we have a problem, work creatively with others to be able to reason and then make judgments and decisions based on accurate information. We know currently the US election it's a big thing everywhere in the news, I think in Indonesia as well. But there's so much misinformation as well, right? When people are campaigning, they talk about they presented the information, accurate information, but some of them are a lot of misinformation as well. So, similar in Indonesia, there's a lot of misinformation, there's a lot of hoax and a lot of apa ya, people who try to make scams and then try to make money through scams. So as educators, it's our responsibility as well to prepare our students so they can make judgments based on facts and accurate information. Because otherwise, they will have a lot of trouble, financial trouble, but also life will be very difficult. Yeah. So one of the frameworks, salah satu framework, this is from the World Economics Forum Education 4.0 framework. If you look across, can hear some background noise. If you don't mind, if you are just joining, kalau baru masuk ke Zoom, barangkali bisa dimatikan suara audionya sehingga tidak mengganggu. Sorry, I go back again. So this is one of the framework. Jadi salah satu frameworknya, kalian bisa cukup jelas. Kalau kita lihat frameworknya, in terms of content and the experiences, I think there's a lot of focus on the importance of our education experience and education, the content of education to prepare ourselves to become a global citizens, ya. Karena sekarang kan batasan dari Indonesia dengan Australia dengan manapun Singapura itu sangat mudah komunikasinya karena we are all connected through internet. We are part of the global community. So as educators and as students, we need to be able to engage with other people from many different countries. Ya, mungkin dari Malaysia, punya teman dari Thailand, punya teman dari Singapore. We need to be able to position ourselves as a member of a global community. That involves critical thinking skill, creative thinking, technology skills ya. Di mata kuliah di Unsri saya percaya teman-teman mahasiswa juga belajar tentang bagaimana menggunakan teknologi a particular app or a particular software like GeoGebra, or maybe some of you were also involved in the research that Pak Adi is leading, for example, using the Mad City Map. So there's a lot of incorporation of technology and mobile technology to support learning. Yeah, so that is also very important in terms of processes, learning processes, and the approaches to learning, because many of you are studying to become teachers. We need to make sure that the students from different backgrounds, including those who probably have special needs, have access to learning and can access learning. We also emphasize on the problem-based and collaborative learning. Working in groups is very important, yeah. But in working in groups also can be quite problematic. I don't know whether you have the experience, but in my experience as well at TIC and when I'm teaching and the assignment involves group work, sometimes there are a few groups who dysfunctional. Ada anggota kelompoknya yang tidak mau bekerja, jadi cuma numpang saja, numpang nama gitu. Namanya ikut, tapi tidak mau berkontribusi. That is problematic, ya. But that also will reflect on the group, the quality of the work that is produced. So we need to make sure that the students through the process actually develop that and learn the importance of, if they're working in groups, they need to contribute and support each other. So I mentioned, I mentioned earlier about the use of ChatGPT and OpenAI. So this image is clearly generated through a Copilot, one of the what we call application that you can generate images. So if you put, sorry. I put an image getting like, a classroom with focus on technology and digital transformation in technology. And they came up with this image within 5 minutes, less than 5 minutes. So it's a very easy thing to do. But I think sometimes the image also contains some interesting inaccuracy, for example. So just make sure that you check for that, whether or not there is any misinformation or incorrect information, for instance. So in my experience, in the previous research project, together with many colleagues at Deakin, we were involved in developing resources to support teachers and students in learning on reasoning and to support teachers in assessing students' mathematical reasoning. So one of the activities that we conducted, one of the exploration that the student did is to investigate conjecture whether or not if the area of a perimeter increases, the perimeter also increases. Ya, salah satu conjecture atau ini bagian dari proyek penelitian. Waktu itu kita membuat bahan-bahan untuk yang dipakai oleh guru, dan ini juga diujikan di sekolah ya dengan guru di SD, di mana mereka fokus dari penalaran matematis siswa di sekolah. Nah, salah satu bahan ajar yang dikembangkan adalah membantu siswa mengeksplorasi hubungan atau conjecture itu bahasa Indonesianya apa ya? Semacam kayak bukan teorema, tapi kayak hipotesis bahwa kalau kita punya persegi, jika persegi itu luasnya bertambah, kelilingnya juga akan bertambah begitu. Ini juga dipublikasikan di artikel di GME Journal of Mathematics Education yang uh, editorial timnya Pak Zul. Itu sudah dipublikasikan. Jadi nanti kalau tertarik membaca lebih jauh bisa dibaca. But what I would like to emphasize is in this particular lesson, the teacher actually used the technology. So using students to use the iPad to use application that's called GeoBoard. So GeoBoard is the application that you can actually create different shape and then investigate the different properties of the shape. So the school, the teachers, and the students, they use GeoBoard application to explore this investigation. And then, if you can see on the right-hand side, the teacher actually get the students to create a story. That's an application that called Show Me, where they actually explain the process of solving the problem and justify their reasoning using Show Me. That because they are recording it to be presented to other students. Yeah. So maybe you can find if you can actually download that application as well and then have a play around with that. So this is more pictures to show that in this lesson, they work in small group, like, a group of 2 to begin with, and then they work in the table group of 4. So they work in pairs first to investigate between the two of them, and you can see that they are dividing their role. One of them is recording the responses or recording the outcome of the investigation. So what's the perimeter, what's the area, and then the other one is creating a table for that to then respond to the conjecture. Recently, last year, I worked with Pak Yarison from UNP and Fritko from Universitas Negeri Padang. So they did this research using GeoGebra. So it's a dynamic and interactive software to explore mathematical properties or mathematical properties, I think. So in this case, they use it for learning the linear function. So getting students to actually use the linear, this one. This is one of the screenshot from the paper. So the students use it to investigate parallel lines, coincident lines, and then the gradient. Okay. So useful for pre-service teachers. So how many of you probably have used GeoGebra before in your courses at Universitas Negeri Sriwijaya as well, so Unsri. So that could be one of the activities. So the other investigations that I did with my pre-service teachers or in-service teachers at Deakin is using the investigations from Enrich website, where they look at so they can use calculator, but they can also use this. So if you open the link in the YouTube, if you find do a search, kalau misalnya adik-adik mahasiswa melakukan search gitu ya, cari Enrich Tiny Nines. And then you can find this investigation. It's a very rich investigation because it helps students to investigate the nature or of notation of rational number and irrational number, the distinction between rational and irrational number, for example. And just by these small, simple activities, they can actually look at the relationship between fractions and decimals and the connections between particular fractions with terminating and non-terminating decimals, for example. So nanti dicoba ya sesudah kuliah ini because if we want to make it interactive, actually I'll get you to do the investigation. But I think because of the time, maybe we don't have enough time to do it today. But maybe Bu Yeka and other lecturers can follow up with you and then get you to do the task and then get you to present your findings. Okay. So I'd like to refer back to the PMRE because this lecture is connected to the RME focus, right? The realistic mathematics education. And Unsuri has been part of the PMRE in Indonesia. So it's one of the, first university in Indonesia who's involved from the beginning. Pak Zul is one of the PhD student, the first PhD student who was sent to Utrecht, along with Pak Fauzan, Pak Sutarto Hadi, and Pak Dian Armanto. So I think the first 4 PhD students who graduated and learned directly about RME in the Netherlands. And then we know it's been happening in Indonesia for more than 20 years now, so over 20 years. So we have a book to celebrate the decade of PMRE. And then recently, Prof. Zulkardim, Prof. Ratu Ilman, Pak Arya Diwijaya wrote a chapter talking about the 2 decades of realistic mathematics education, which I'm sure probably is one of your key reading for the unit or for the course. That has been very important in Indonesian math education. I think in Unsri, you have experience because of Pak Zul and the team at Unsri are very active in International Mathematics Day. That is another important thing to actually share the joy of learning mathematics and the connection and celebrate the connection of mathematics with art, with creativity, with everyday life, like with exercises, physical activities, and all the things that you see every day, but also we use it daily. In arts, in architecture, so many mathematics, right? So I think that's important. So, and you can find a lot of resources already developed in many different parts of the world that you can learn about different cultures as well and different use of mathematics. So 2 weeks ago, I went to China for a week as part of the exchange program organized by Shanghai Normal University. As part of the trip, they took us to Chengdu, to Sichuan in Chengdu so Sichuan is part of Chengdu province in China, and they have this ancient water irrigation system. That's the name of the place, to Jiangyang. So irrigation system that is still working until now. So, and we had the opportunity to actually they call it the matcha. So they create the matcha together with the group and it was so fun. Well, also we work with the students, the students. I don't know whether you can see the picture, but there are some students who is sort of like the ambassador for the day, and they are part of the group. And we work together. I should show you the picture where we stand at the matcha, but you can see there's a lot of mathematics there, because also when we create that base, the base is a triangle, right? You can see that the three, how many? One, two, three, four, five, six, but it forms the triangular base at the bottom, and that is very strong. But also it reminds me when we did that, it reminds me about the article and the framework on that Russell Tadler and colleagues at Deakin came up with, to talk about how um, the different disciplines like science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, also shortened STEM, can interact and are interacting together when we are engaging in the STEM activity. So mathematics is used there, science is used, engineering is used, technology is used together to create that experience and product. So coming back to mathematical literacy, recently, when I prepare for the talk, I look and search for some news article. So the latest PISA 2022. Unfortunately, we are still not doing very well in Indonesia, but there are some also positive things that I would like us to reflect and think about. Okay, so in terms of ranking, obviously, Indonesia is still behind, like, at the bottom, sort of like quartile of the performing countries. But it's not the only thing about PISA, right? I think we can learn much more just looking at the ranking. What do we need to do better next time? Because I know there's a lot of investment in mathematical literacy in Indonesia, even like in Unsri, I think you do have the literacy contest, mathematical literacy contest for many, many years. So there's a lot of work that have been happening, and that's very positive, and there's impact. But I think to see the impact in a more significant way, there still needs some work that we need to do. So if you look at the framework, the PISA framework, where they talk about 21st century skills, but also they highlighted the importance of mathematical reasoning at the center, right? So penalaran matematika is a very important aspect in developing that 21st century skills. And in the latest PISA, what we notice is that there is a new emphasis on creativity and creative thinking. So creativity in mathematics. Um, and there are some good news about the creativity in mathematics outcome for Indonesia as well. So going back to connections to the context, the focus of the PISA items is really looking at mathematical literacy, how the mathematics is used in everyday context, and all the problem that we look at here. Here. I'm sorry about this. The other text. If you look at the PISA items, it's always set in context. So either the context is sports, the context can be reading a news article, the context can be, comparing different mobile phone usage, or, comparing data, uh, understanding the map or things like that, but it's always set in context. So that is to show that, mathematics cannot be separated from our everyday life. When we learn mathematics, we learn it because we need mathematics to use our everyday problem, to solve our everyday problem. So mathematics is not just in the textbook. So when I mentioned in the recent PISA, there's a focus on creative thinking, and this is how PISA defined creative thinking. So creative thinking is the ability to generate, to evaluate, and improve ideas. So how do we differentiate between creative thinkers and non-creative thinkers? So often the mark or the indicators are they come up with original ideas. They come up with more effective way to solve problems, like, a faster way of something that no one else think about, for example. So that is impactful. Sorry, it really shows the imaginations. Okay, so that's the definition of the creative thinking. So how well did 15-year-old students in Indonesia do on the creative thinking test in the latest PISA? So this is the performance. I hope you can see it. So the overall performance is pretty uh pretty disappointing to say, because it's Indonesia performed pretty low, below the overall OECD average. So this is the OECD average. I don't know whether you can see my cursor, but Indonesia is here. So it's way below the OECD average. Philippines is behind us. But if we look at the relative performance in terms of um, the mathematics, we are still also below the OECD average. Here is the OECD average. So we are still below the expectations, right? When we look at the variance, probably it's a little bit similar to many other countries. But what I find is interesting, and this is the positive thing to share and to point out, is that they found that in Indonesia, 60% of disadvantaged students in Indonesia were able to score in the top quartile, right? Top quarter of the creative thinking performance within Indonesia. So what they call in this report, they say that this disadvantaged students are resilient creative thinkers, because despite the disadvantage, because they are not coming from the advantaged background, like they're coming from uh, maybe low socioeconomic background, because PISA look at the data as well. And usually the top performing students often is the top coming from advantaged background, that there is a correlation in most of the countries, and including Indonesia. I think there is a correlation between that. But in Indonesia, the fact that quite a good number of disadvantaged students actually perform quite well in the creative thinking score shows that, actually it's pretty good in Indonesia. I mean, that even though there's so many areas to be developed, but there are some positive as well. So also when we look at the pedagogies, this is the survey from students, from secondary students, and they were asked about pedagogies and activities encouraging creative thinkings, and these are some of the sort of prompts that were used. And if you look at Indonesia, Indonesia performed pretty positive, the outcome of this survey, looking at the pedagogy, which means that the teachers actually encourage students to come up with creative solutions in their assignment, which is very good, because then if the teachers actually didn't expect that, or didn't provide opportunities for students to come up with creative solutions, then they won't be fostered, right, the creative thinking. And if the teachers also value very highly creative thinking, student creativity, encourage students to come up with original answers, and then they're given opportunities to share and express their ideas. So those are very positive. So I would like to paint a more positive pictures also, because often we focus too much on the academic performance, which is also very important. But I think because PISA now pay attention also to creative thinking, and sometimes creative thinking, it doesn't have to be like, if the students are creative, mostly creative, they also perform academically very highly, but the other way around also. So there's not it doesn't have to be that way, which means that there are some promising outcome for Indonesian students to work on that. So in terms of the use of local context and the use of different approaches, as you can see in this screenshot, in Indonesia, we are not lacking of that. Yeah, because a lot of research PhD students recently this year, when I went to Unsri, also many of you shared your proposal for PhD thesis, and I was quite impressed with the authentic context that the PhD students use in the coming up with those local contexts in supporting students' learning of mathematics. Yeah, so that those are very positive and very important. Um, and I was reminded on this experience from many years ago because this small research was conducted when I had the visiting scholar position at the NIE for in 2011 to 2011. So we came to Jogja to do this small research with the teachers and the students. And you can see in this picture, we use the context of traveling on the bus and getting students to come up with the most efficient routes for the bus to travel to school. So, and then my colleagues from Singapore was very impressed because the students in this school in the school, although they are not a rich school or they're not very well-resourced school, the students are very creative and very engaging in the task, and they presented communicated their thinking very well. And those are PMRI school. So I was very proud and very happy with that experience. With pre-service teachers, also, when I was still at Sanata Dharma University in the methodology unit, usually I get them to actually do mathematical modeling unit where they have to do experiments, test the experiments, and then present it, their group work. And then we had the gallery walk where they actually explain the project to other groups and then justify their mathematical thinking there. More recently, I had the opportunity to do a young professor in Surabaya, and I spent maybe 2 weeks there. And then we had this one of the tasks that I'm going to show you, but they worked together, and it took a while at the beginning because the pre-service teachers wasn't very sure what to do. But once they get started, I think they can then come up with very meaningful suggestions and ideas. How did we go with time, Buyeka? And do we still have time?
Yes, we have still time, but maybe some our student want to ask some questions to you.
Okay.
Okay. Anyone have a question? Please raise your hand, or you can chat in the chat box. Ada nggak? Okay. If there is no question, so I would like to ask you a questions related to a task itself. Sometimes we have misunderstanding about the definition of task. So sometimes we interpret that a task as a problem, or in Bahasa we call it soal, but it's not always the case. It's not always soal as a task. So my question is, how can we design a very good rich task, Bu Wanti?
Yeah,
Can you explain that?
that's a very good question. So, uh, my answer to that is like I encourage, like with our projects, for example, the resolve reasoning one that we put together, those rich tasks were not coming, we're already there, like, so what we develop is actually a rubric to really, and professional learning for teachers to be able to use the task more meaningfully. So there are so many tasks already, rich tasks available, right? So we can adapt it to the local context. But what is important, I think, when we are giving the task is to really engage students in deep mathematical learning. And I think the challenge is often facilitating the rich discussions coming from students. Like on Monday, I spent the two workshop sessions with students, pre-service teachers from Universitas Negeri Jakarta at UNJ. And then I used the task of Magic V, which we developed as one of the resolve reasoning tasks. And then the other one is the painted cube task. Those tasks have been around for a long time. Okay, so you don't have to create your own tasks. I think it is probably better to use a task that was already tested and develop, and then maybe you adapt it. But I think the critical thing is to actually generate the discussion and allow for students to come up with their ideas and ask a lot of questions to facilitate the conversations. There's a lot of tasks or a lot of rich tasks. You don't want to create a task that is just very superficial. So I think the mathematics itself is the one that the reasoning, for example. So in the reasoning resources, we do prepare a lot of reasoning prompts, so questions for that teachers can ask students to share their reasoning and to share their thinking. And then we created a rubric for the teachers to assess the level of reasoning for each students. And then that way the teacher can then plan the follow-up tasks or follow-up activities to support their reasoning. Yeah. I hope that answered the question, Bu Yi.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I think we can learn from what the research that exists in some research that published in the article. Yeah,
Mm.
but we also have a question in the chat box.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
Bu Septi, Bu
Activities
Septi.
modeling. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, sure. Bisa, Bu Sabti. So, okay. So that one, that was the one that I conducted. This one conducted in 20. Yeah, it was published in the Marga proceeding. I can send it to you if you send me an email. I'll send it to you the article or the paper. It was only a very short paper. But actually the task itself I adapted from the book that I got from Professor Ang Keng Cheng written by Professor Ang Keng Cheng in Singapore, NIE Singapore. So there is a collection of mathematical modeling tasks. I just use the task to and get my pre-service teachers to do the experiment and then come up with their hypothesis, make their assumption, and then come up with the model because they have to do collection of data. So what they did is they they first identify their hypothesis. So for example, because this is modeling the process of cooling of coffee. So if you make coffee and then you put it into different cups, for example, you use the same type of coffee, for instance, and then you cool it off in the room temperature, and then you collected the data of for how many minutes and what's the temperature of the coffee, um, the process of cooling down coffee. So the pre-service teachers, try with different variables, obviously, a different type of cut marks, different size of the marks as well. What is interesting is that they can generate the data, no problem. But I think the challenge is the assumption. So because if you create as an assumption, we don't have an explicit assumption, and then also if you have put too many variables, it's going to be very difficult to identify which variables impact on the process of cooling down the coffee, right? And then that's the connection between the Newton law, the physics, the process of cooling down of coffee, and the mathematics itself will involve the data generations, and then the graphing of the relationship and the equation. So it is very difficult. It's not an easy task. It's mathematically it's quite advanced. So I think the connection to the science is another thing that I personally also need to learn. So I think when it comes to the process of facilitating the process project like this, it would be good to collaborate with colleagues from science, for example, because then we can deepen the conversation and the discussion for students. That's my reflection, I think.
Okay, Bu Anti, you can continue your presentation if you
Okay.
have
All
any.
right. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so the next part of the session, the lecture, I would like to share the current, sorry, this one, okay, the chat is coming up and popping up in my screen, sorry. So this is a Australian Research Council grant that I'm a part of. This is the research team, so it involves a lot of people, involves a lot of universities as well. So it's funded from the Australian Research Council. and it's finishing this year, but I just want to show you a little bit of the activities that I would like to invite you. So, bagaimana kalau kita mau mengukur denyut jantung? What do we know? Apa yang kita tahu tentang proses mengukur denyut jantung? Bisa mungkin ada yang mau menjawab? Pakai apa? Maybe you can unmute yourself. Nah, oke. Siapa yang mau menunjukkan bagaimana mau mengukur denyut jantung? Ada yang tunjuk tanya? Oke. Oh yeah, good. Bu Septi, terima kasih. So you use your hands like this, yeah? Is there a different way? Is that the only way? Ada yang lain, cara lain kalau mau mengukur denyut jantung selain pergelangan nadi? Apa? Sini ya, di sini ya, di leher juga bisa. Ada lagi yang di mana? Jempol bisa kah? Susah ya. Okay, so there are different ways of measuring our heart rate. Okay. How could we measure our heart rate? So this is the questions that we ask. Why does our heart rate increase or decrease? Kenapa denyut jantung kita naik atau turun? Apa penyebabnya misalnya? Any thoughts? Mungkin ada yang mau menjawab? Okay, some people responded in the chat. Okay, pakai stetoskop di area ya. Saat panik, that's true. Apa aktivitas yang dilakukan? Maksudnya apa itu ya? Aktivitas yang dilakukan. So, panik atau takut atau kalau nonton horror movie, maybe some of them said like when they watch a horror movie, yeah, when you exercise, okay, that's good. Or you got a shock, so your heart rate increases. Maybe some of you were just before exam, you got very agitated and very anxious, then your heart rate will increase. What do we do to decrease the heart rate? Kalau mau menurunkan denyut jantung, apa yang kita lakukan? Ya, calm ourselves, take a breath, atur nafas, membuat, oke, istirahat, tarik nafas, maybe yoga. Some people say sleeping or, resting or do yoga, do meditation. There are many different things to do, right? So that's right, meditation. So and then how can we measure your beats per minute accurately without a smartwatch? Because many students nowadays and teachers they use smartwatch, yeah. So if you use smartwatch, you can get your heart rate in the in the watch. You can find out about your heart rate in the watch, but we don't want students to do that. So we get them to measure your beats per minute, yeah. Then get them to list some ideas. So because of time, I will go through this a little bit quicker, but I'll show you what we did in classroom with students in primary school. So I think when we are talking about this notion, so this is a lesson sequence. So we completed within 3 to 4 meetings, 4 lessons in primary schools, and get students to think about the variance. Yeah, obviously different students when they measure their beats per minute, they find out that actually there's a big difference between one child to another child. So some students have when they measure their beats per minute, it will be 60. Some of them may be 90, 95. Some of them are very fast, like, maybe they did a lot of exercise before that. So the task itself, get them to work in small groups, and they need to design an experiment to create or increase the heart rate by 50%. So they need to plan an activity they can do together to test and then collect the data that increase the heart rate by 50%. Okay, they need to specify their hypothesis. What is the activity? How long do they have to do it? How many times they have to do it? So some students say, do a star jump for 50, no, do 20 star jumps. Then that's the hypothesis. By doing a star jump, 20 star jumps, they will increase the heart rate by 50%. That's their hypothesis. And then the other group will test it. They need to identify the material and the procedures, how to do it, and then they conduct the experiment and then reflect on the experiment. And at the end of the lesson sequence, they need to revisit their hypothesis. Okay. So this is one example of the pictures or the data that we did in the classroom. So the teacher actually did this experiment or walk through the whole experience with the students, including modeling the like at the beginning, he wanted to emphasize on the importance of accuracy and doing it on a similar pace, like kind of like similar pace. Because then if you said to the other group, walk in the spot for 20 seconds or something like that, then make sure that the pace of the walk is similar. So he modeled that with the students together. And then the mathematics discussion involves, for example, identifying different ways of calculating beats per minute. Beats per minute mean like it's dalam 1 menit itu berapa, denyut jantungnya berapa kali. So you can actually calculate it for 10 seconds or 20 seconds or 15 seconds or 60 seconds, right? You can calculate it in fractional parts or 60 seconds in one time. But they also realized that actually measuring the beats per minute, if they just do it in 60 seconds, it's quite difficult because they have to concentrate. And sometimes when you put your fingers on the pulse, sometimes it's not, the pulse is not constant, right? So it can be quite difficult to feel for 60 seconds. So many of them, the discussion in the classroom involves, okay, maybe then measuring it for 10 seconds might be more accurate because then you can multiply it by 60. Sorry, I go backwards instead of forwards. So that's an example of, for instance, this lesson sequence that we developed as part of that research. This example is from a STEM interdisciplinary project that I conducted with Pak Sarkim and Pak Hongki and Pak Arif in Sanata Dharma University. So that was probably about 5 years ago, before COVID, where we plan and work with secondary school, Guru SMP di Jogja, and then we create the STEM experience where we bring maths and science together. So in Yogyakarta, at Sanata Dharma University, Pak Sarkim and Pak Ongki and team work with the secondary school teachers there, and one of the STEM experience that they chose involved the concept of looking at concept of a Venn diagram or set theory. So himpunan ya, waktu mahasiswa belajar tentang himpunan dan diagram Venn dan teori himpunan, and connecting it to the biology. This classification of animal. The topic is classification of animal, but also they actually took the students to the zoo, Gembira Loka Zoo, to do that experiment. So connecting it with the outdoor experience, getting students to really examine the different types of animals, how the animals are separated, the different type of animals are separated, and also the number of animals. And they created this beautiful presentation where the group presented their findings, and then they come up with this very beautiful drawing. I was so impressed with that. So again, coming back to the PISA, Indonesia students are very creative and very good at creating this sort of connections. In the same project in Australia, what we did is we get the students in year 7, which is class 1 SMP, yeah, to also do an investigation or write a report on the ecology of the animals and the plants that they can find, they can observe, they could observe in the park nearby the school, because the school next door to the school there is a sort of like a park area, and then in this case then they need to list the abiotic and biotic factors, if they can identify like the type of birds like magpie and other birds, but also calculate the number of percentage of ground coverage, for example, how many percent was covered by grass, how many percent by dirt, and then talk about the tree, collect data. They take a photo and then they create the evidence of the site, and then they do also the presentations at the end of the project. And to assess that project, then the teachers create that assessment rubric that really identify the different progressions of learning that is evident through the project report by the students. And this is just the Victorian file science understanding, because the focus is on the science and map. I didn't have the picture of the mathematics yet, but they do that mapping in the rubric for the teachers. I think maybe we stop. I'll just share this one, but then I think we'll stop for question and answer. I'm mindful of time. So the other task that I actually easily modified by, in different local contexts. So you can modify it to the context of Palembang, for example. Earlier this week, I asked, no, yesterday, I modified to the local context of Karawang when I presented to teachers in Karawang, for instance. But you can think about, if you get your students or your pre-service teachers to think about, okay, if you have a new resident, ya, pendatang baru datang ke Palembang, baru datang dan tidak paham tentang Palembang, benar-benar baru asing dengan Palembang, you need to write a report to recommend this new resident, pendatang baru ini mau tinggal di mana, oke, daerah mana, di distrik mana, atau di apa, kecamatan mana, apa di Palembang namanya apa ya? Ya, saya
Kecamatan juga.
apa?
Kecamatan juga.
Kecamatan juga ya, kecamatan atau distrik di Palembang. So kalau untuk bisa menyelesaikan masalah ini, obviously different groups might come up with a different recommendations. But I think the first thing that we need to be very aware of is what is our assumption, ya. Asumsi kita apa? Karena pendatang baru ini kan bisa saja pendatang baru itu family, keluarga dengan anak kecil yang masih sekolah di SD atau masih sekolah di SMP. It would be very different recommendation if the new resident is someone like me. I don't have any children. I don't need to send my anyone to school. So then the recommendation would be very different. It depends on the income of the person, obviously, the affordability of the area. So assumption is important, right? Before even we begin to solve the problem, we need to identify what is our assumption of the new resident, because we don't know who are the new residents. So you need to make that very clear. Okay, if we are given the profile of the new resident, maybe then the responses would be a little bit more similar. Yeah, the recommendation might be a little bit more similar. But if we don't have any idea about the new resident, then it's really up to you to decide who is the profile, what is the profile of the new resident, and then you come up with a recommendation based on the assumption, and then you need to justify what are the criteria, convince other people that this is the best area for you to live because of this is the data, the statistical data, the mathematics, and that is very important, and that involves a lot of reasoning, a lot of critical thinking, creative thinking, and reasoning. Yeah, so that is very important. So I don't know whether this map is very accurate, but this is from Google search. And Palembang, they're different colorful region. So there might be a region that is very expensive, not affordable, or there might be a region that you recommend because it's has a good environment, very safe, have good schools and things like that. So how can we be sure? So I think the question, if we want to emphasize on the mathematical literacy and mathematical reasoning, is what is the reasoning, the mathematical reasoning and the mathematical justification. So it has to be using data. Maybe you use table, maybe you use graph to represent the facts. And then comparison perhaps with other districts. The number, when I trialed this in Surabaya, the students talk about the access to hospital, for example, the access to schools, the access to public transports, and things like that. They factor those into considerations, for instance. So that's very important. And I would like to end by this quote from my former PhD supervisor, Professor Keith Stacy, about the importance of giving children opportunity to be active in testing and making conjectures, testing their ideas, so they can actually experience that joy of discovery. Because I think if we are not providing that opportunity for students to learn mathematics through um, exploration, through identifying pattern, to generating ideas, generating new patterns, they lost that joy of learning mathematics. They will just find it boring or difficult and disengaging. So I think it is very important when we selecting the task, create that experience for students in mind. Okay. And at the end, I think earlier this year in July, Prof. Zul and Prof. Ratu Ilma came to Melbourne, that came to Deakin, and I would like to actually share. I mean, like, we have to be very proud of the achievement that Prof. Zul and Prof. Ilma and the team, including Ruli and also Duano and the team, who are work very hard in getting Journal on Mathematics Education to become international journal. Q2 is very, very impressive. So I think starting at the local level at Universitas Sriwijaya and now becoming an international journal, that's a big achievement to be celebrated. So I'll stop there, and then I think we still have about maybe 15 minutes or 20 minutes to for question and answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Wanti, for the interesting lecture. Maybe there is a question from our students. You can raise your hand or posting in the chat box. Boleh bertanya langsung, boleh juga di kolom chat ya. Silahkan ya, kalau ada pertanyaan. Boleh bahasa Indonesia, karena Bu Wanti juga paham bahasa Indonesia. Silahkan.
Yeah, welcome to ask the question. Silakan berbahasa Indonesia.
Ya. Ada nggak pertanyaan? Silahkan. Dari mahasiswa S1, S2, S3 yang sedang melakukan research, boleh bertanya. Yang raise hand di Zoom, silahkan. Ada nggak yang raise hand di sini? Belum ada ya?
Belum.
How to deal with a very passive students in the classroom? This is a very related question at the
Yeah.
moment. So there is a question, Prof. Wanti, in the chat
Yeah.
box.
So I think that is a very important and valid questions because it can be challenging, yeah. I think this is coming back to the selection of the task. I think when we try to come up with the task, I think there's a background noise. Come up with a task, make sure we select a task that everyone can attempt. Jadi kalau kita mau memilih masalah yang kita angkat untuk siswa bisa aktif gitu ya, kita harus ingat bahwa masalah itu tidak boleh yang terlalu jadi semua anak itu bisa mencoba gitu ya. We need to make sure that everyone can actually make an attempt. They don't have to finish it at the same level. Jadi yang disebut istilahnya sekarang kalau nanti teman-teman mahasiswa menggoogle itu low floor high ceiling task, which means that everyone can actually attempt the task. So the starting point is quite low. Jadi entry point-nya itu untuk siswa bisa mencoba masalah itu tidak tinggi, tetapi kita bisa men-challenge gitu ya, menantang siswa yang baik-baik gitu ya reasoningnya, ditantang lebih lebih sulit lagi masalahnya. Jadi awalnya itu masalahnya harus masalah yang semua orang itu di kelas bisa mencoba, tetapi kalau hanya berhenti di level yang low saja, akan tidak menantang, akan menjadi membosankan kan untuk anak-anak yang perlu extension. So the teacher has to be prepared to make an extension. Jadi makanya disebut low floor, high ceiling tasks. Jadi if we try a task, we always have to think about how the extension kids, students yang sangat cepat itu bisa ditantang lebih lebih lagi gitu. Tapi masalahnya itu harus untuk siswa yang mungkin kemampuannya lebih kurang, itu bisa mencoba. So if you have a very passive students in the classroom, you want to be able to engage them by making sure that the task itself is something that is doable for those students. Itu pertama. Yang kedua adalah classroom expectation, the classroom norm. Jadi norma dari kelas itu sangat penting ya. Kalau gurunya punya ekspektasi bahwa siswa itu harus bisa menjelaskan, harus mau mencoba masalah, tidak harus bisa menemukan jawaban yang benar, tetapi mencoba. They have to at least try and work together with colleagues, with their peers. Then if that becomes an expectation and consistently expect that in every lesson, they'll know. Jadi dulu waktu saya belajar PMRI dan kami ke Padang, saya masih ingat sekali, ini sudah lebih dari 10 tahun yang lalu ya. Gurunya itu di Padang itu siswanya itu selalu mendekati guru gitu dan bertanya, Bu, ini jawaban saya benar atau tidak? Bu, ini jawaban saya benar atau tidak? Jadi gurunya sibuk menjawab anak-anak itu ya apa um, that's not a good thing because like that it means that the student is relying on the teacher to tell them whether or not they are on the right track, ya kan? Yang harus dirubah adalah norma kelasnya. Norma kelasnya guru harus menekankan pada anak bahwa you need to think for yourself or think with your peers to assess whether or not you think that's correct. If you don't think it's correct, maybe if you disagree or agreeing with other students in the classroom. Jadi normanya harus dibangun bahwa siswa itu bisa tidak setuju dengan temannya. Boleh bersuara tidak setuju, jawabannya tidak harus sama. Jadi norma kelas itu yang harus dibangun sehingga anak merasa safe. They feel they are safe. They can actually say something. They don't feel that they have to say I think my answer is wrong or my answer is not correct, then I keep quiet. Itu yang saya kira yang sulit biasanya untuk guru adalah membangun budaya siswa untuk ditantang untuk berani berbicara di kelas dan diberi kesempatan. Mungkin awalnya perlu didorong-dorong dulu gitu ya, tapi enggak apa-apa. Butuh waktu. So you need to give time to students, but set expectations and then value. Jadi kalau gurunya itu melihat siswanya tadinya pasif lalu berubah, diberi pujian gitu ya, diberi pujian dan lalu siswa akan termotivasi begitu. Saya kira itu kalau siswa diberi motivasi akan sangat senang dia berubah. So try that maybe I think if you give it a go and see how it goes.
Bu Anti, we still have a question on chat box.
Yeah. Yeah,
Apakah
okay. The other one is context, ya.
ya?
Oke. Apa konteks yang baik? Oke. Konteks yang baik adalah saya kira konteks yang relatable to the students. So if you think about the context, choosing a good context is not easy. For me also, it's not easy. So that's why I think like a good task, a rich task, is something that you can modify to suit the local context. Jadi kalau tasknya seperti yang tadi saya bagikan itu bisa diganti mana saja kan sebetulnya konteksnya yang ini tadi. We can change it to the local context in Bandung, local context in anywhere. But I think this task also you need to probably have a little bit more guidance in terms of if you want to assess the reasoning and assess the mathematics and assess the other area. Yeah, I think that is important to make sure that the context is something that students can enjoy. For example, cooking context. That's quite often is something that we can use with students. It makes it more relatable because they might do cooking. Kalau anaknya itu misalnya belanja, konteks belanja, something that they can relate to in everyday life, I think that's an important context, a useful context. It might not be a very fancy context, but it can be something that students can relate to. But it depends on the level of uh, the schooling, yeah. Kalau primary maybe has to be context that are exciting as well for them. Yeah.
Yeah, now some questions comes up.
Yeah, thank you. I can see that.
Yeah,
High
you want to,
school students. Yeah.
okay, you can answer this
Yeah,
question
yeah. Okay.
shortly, maybe.
Yeah. So the example that I gave you about the ecology project that is in middle school, sorry, not high school, but in middle school. It's true that in certain year level, maybe the students might not, or the teachers might not be so keen to try different type of projects because they might focus more on preparing their students for examinations. And that's the same in Australia. In Australia, at the end of the year 12, the students have to set for um, the ATAR score. So the ATAR score determine which university they can go to or which course they can do at the university. So there's a high pressure sort of test at the end of high school. So, but yeah, I think that's a challenge. But really, I think it really depends on the teachers and what do teachers value, because some teachers who are very innovative and they are happy to try different things, but there are teachers who probably a little bit more conservative and they don't want to try to uh, just use textbooks, which is, following the textbooks and do what the textbook suggests. So yeah, it's the same in Australia and in many other countries. There are teachers who are quite innovative, but there are also teachers who don't want to go outside their comfort zone. Okay. So the next point is, okay, the question is apakah dalam pembelajaran RMA harus memuat aktivitas yang dilakukan oleh siswa? Uh, Bagaimana jika pembelajaran RMA hanya memuat aktivitas tertulis dan permasalahan kontekstual? So I'm not too sure if I can answer this question. Does it mean that it has to be trial? Is it with the students in school? Apakah pertanyaannya itu ya? Hmm?
Sepertinya maksudnya adalah aktivitas RMI itu seperti berkaitan dengan beraktivitas secara langsung. Bagaimana kalau aktivitasnya hanya berbentuk tertulis di LKPD seperti itu?
Hanya
Tidak,
membuat LKPD saja, tidak
tidak
dicobakan di kelas, begitu.
tidak bermain peran atau tidak beraktivitas secara langsung, misalnya mengukur, aktivitas mengukur atau
Ya,
aktivitas
ya.
apa, tetapi hanya menuliskan di kertas saja di LKPD-nya. Apakah itu juga termasuk ke dalam kategori
Oh,
pembelajaran RI
ya.
matematik?
At- Kalau penelitiannya itu fokusnya mengembangkan modul, I think we still need to trial it because I think that's the empirical ideas ya. Karena kita kan kadang kalau hanya membuat lembar kerja saja tanpa mencobakan di sekolah itu abstrak ya. Jadinya apa? We cannot really see whether or not the activities are useful for, I mean, like, there are some parts of the activity that probably need to be reworded differently. So, kalau saya dalam pengalaman penelitian saya selalu biasanya ada aspek bekerja di sekolah begitu atau dengan pre-service teachers atau di kampus begitu dengan guru, uh, because we need those insights, we need those jadi siklusnya ya, siklus kalau di, kan biasanya kalau di RMA itu penelitiannya menggunakan design research. Dan design research kan you start with the design, but then you need to implement it, you need to test it in the classroom situation, and then you reflect and then refine the design based on your analysis. And then you go through another cycles. So ideally, I think that you need to have that cycle of testing it, and then you can come up with a more refined design. Yes, that's my view, but you might need to check with your your lecturer at Unsri, whether or not that is the same view, because we might have a different view.
Yes, we have a same view since mathematics as human activity,
Yeah.
so it's better to do activity in the class.
Mm.
So Jessica question itu berkaitan dengan mungkin selama ini aktivitas di kelas itu hanya tulis menulis menyelesaikan soal di paper seperti itu. Jadi sangat apa namanya berbeda dengan apa
Ah,
contoh-contoh yang diberikan oleh Bu Anti.
yeah.
Ternyata contoh dari aktivitas Coffee tadi ada kegiatan mengukur,
Yeah.
kemudian sih, nah itu yang dipertanyakan oleh mahasiswa kita
Yeah.
ya
Tergantung
pembelajaran.
dosennya itu. So really, I think depends on the lecturer. When I taught at Sanata Dharma, I was a bit brave. Like I was a bit going outside the box. Like yeah, I think I like to try different things and then get students, pre-service teachers to experience different approaches in teaching mathematics as well. So, but it really depends on yeah the lecture itself. I mean, it might take a little bit more time because and but I think the pre-service teachers enjoy it. I think my understanding.
Okay, the last question, or we still have 1 minute left, maybe.
Mm,
Yeah.
there's one message. Apakah konteks yang dihindari? Okay. That's a good question. I don't know. Is there any context? I would avoid the context that is offensive for a particular student or particular group of people. Ya, konteks yang sensitif ya. Saya kira kalau konteksnya akan sedikit bisa menyinggung perasaan atau menyinggung ya tidak membuat siswa menjadi tidak nyaman begitu ya. Even I think in Australia, sometimes we were told that like the context of heights, for instance, like kalau di Australian katanya konteks misalnya membandingkan berat badan atau membandingkan tinggi badan itu agak sensitif untuk siswa. So we try to avoid that. I don't know in Indonesian context because I think there might be you know if you're comparing the weights misalnya berat badan begitu ya mau membandingkan lalu membuat chart atau apa mungkin menjadi ada semacam isu bullying atau apa begitu ya konteks-konteks yang sensitif seperti itu I would try to avoid yeah I think that's probably context that will kind of like create or anything related to violence or yeah anything related to illegal activities I would try to avoid but yeah sometimes I think you might want to be provocative but I think to be on the safe side is also important I think yeah
Okay,
semoga menjawab ya.
yeah. Thank you very much for a very insightful and interesting lecture today.
Okay.
And we also can see that our students are also participating by responding in the chat box. Thank you very
Yes.
much for the contribution for
Yeah.
our students. I think it is the end of our class with Prof. Wanti Wijaya. Once again, thank you very much, Prof. Wanti. I hope we can see you in the next class and in next weeks, maybe.
Is that the same group or different group of students?
The same group, the
I think so I
course
have
of
to be
realistic
different topics.
mathematics education. Yes.
Okay.
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 Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And
So just let me know the arrangement because I might not be able to do it at the same time, but we can negotiate the timing, I think. Okay.
okay.
Okay. Thank
Kita,
you.
kita dokumentasikan dulu ya Bu Anti. Kita foto dulu layar
Yeah.
kita untuk perkuliahan kita hari ini. Host, tolong dong di capture layarnya.
Or maybe I will need to do I need to take a stop sharing?
Yes. Ya, sudah. Semua mahasiswa tolong buka kameranya biar bisa di screenshot oleh host. Sudah, host?
Ini nggak sama Bang. Ya satu, dua, tiga. Sudah?
Sudah? Oke, thank you very much Bu Wanti. See you.
Sama-sama.
Yeah, see you in the next class and have a great day.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very
Bye.
much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Terima kasih ya semuanya. Kita bertemu lagi insya Allah jika ada jadwal dari beliau minggu depan, insya Allah minggu depan kita bertemu kembali. Oke, terima kasih. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.
Waalaikumsalam. Terima kasih Bu
Terima kasih,
Yeka.
Bu.
Oke.